Hey guys, welcome back to the Touch MBA podcast. I'm your host, Darren. This week I brought on Sara Vanos from the HEC Paris MBA program, and I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this one. We had a really open, down-to-earth conversation about what makes the HEC Paris MBA unique, in addition to its long history and prestige and being a top-ranked program for a very, very long time in Europe. And I think you'll get a really good idea about what you can get from this program. I didn't realize how customizable it was, as well as how much HEC Paris prizes diversity in their selection process and in their program. So pay close attention. Sara drops a lot of great application tips in this episode, and I hope this helps a lot of you applying to not only HEC Paris MBA, but any other top program in Europe as well. And before we get into the interview, just a reminder that we specialize at Touch MBA in helping applicants who are looking at international business schools. So if you need help with shortlisting schools that might fit you best, having an outside expert look at your profile and give you some tips on how you could strengthen your application before you apply, go head over to touchmba.com and we'd be happy to give you some free help over there. Now let's get straight to my talk with Sara. Here we go. I'm really thrilled to have our next guest on the show. I've been looking forward to interviewing someone from this business school for a long time, so I'm really excited for today's interview. It's my pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of Marketing and Admissions for MBA Programs at HEC Paris, based in France, Sara Vanos. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast, Sara. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you so much, Darren, for having me. I'm looking forward to discussing, sharing, and telling you all about HEC today.
Well, just to get things started, could you tell us a bit more about your responsibilities at HEC Paris, being the executive director?
Yeah, sure. So I'm responsible for 3 programs here. So our MBA full-time, which is 16 months. We'll talk a little bit more, so I won't do any spoiler alerts. Our executive MBA, which is a part-time program, which can endure for between 15 and 21 months, and also our Trium Global Executive MBA programs. So I'm responsible for the communications, so content generation, social media, our brand awareness worldwide, as well as our marketing and our recruitment teams. So we have recruiters who travel the world looking for the best and brightest students. And then also I'm responsible for admissions. So I see every application that comes in. I get to hear all about all of the students. So that's basically my parameter here.
Wow. Okay. I'm so glad we have you on the show, everyone. Pay close attention. So, okay, let's just jump right into it. The first question I always ask every school is, I know HEC Paris has been a top-ranked school for a long time, has a long history, but what makes it unique from other top MBA programs in Europe and the world?
Yeah. So I think our MBA is really special for several reasons. One, I think, is the program length. So the standard length is 16 months. It really allows you to do everything you could do in 2 years in a slightly shorter time for better ROI. It is a flexible program, though, so it can be accelerated and completed in 12 months. So that's a possibility. So I think these program lengths are quite distinctive, specifically the 16 months. We have one of, if not the most customizable MBAs. So you can really pick and choose through the path, different things that you want to do. And you finish the program with a specialization in one of 5 different fields. So you can really kind of curate that. We have on-campus housing, which is quite unusual for an MBA program. So when you attend HEC Paris, you have the option, we're just 20 minutes outside of Paris, of living on the campus. It's beautiful. It's walled. There's a castle. You can do 20K trail runs. So this is quite unique, the diversity of our program. And we have this year, I think, over 60 different nationalities in a rather small cohort. So we cap it at 300. We have between 250 and 300 graduating students per year. This is really based on quality. So the number is dictated by the number of great applications that we receive. I would say those are kind of the highlights, but there's so much more. But I wanted this to be like a conversation. So I'll let you maybe ask more questions there.
Fantastic. So let's start with the size. Yep. I know you guys have 2 different intakes in January and September. So can you explain, like, is that 300, 250 to 300 person cohort for both? Does that take into account both January and September?
Yeah, so we have 5 sections total, so 3 sections in September and 2 sections in January, with a maximum of 300 students across those 5 sections. It means that your section is relatively small in class, so you have a lot of interaction with professors and you don't feel like you're at the back of a giant amphitheater. It's very interactive, and the professors really get to know our students. They ask us about them before they even arrive. They take the profile book, they know them by name. So this is quite special. And yeah, starting in September or January, completely optional, really based on the person's goals and their timelines, their professional background, all of that.
Well, I mean, so on that note, would you recommend a certain type of applicant, for example, to apply in January rather than September, and maybe for that 12 months versus 16 months?
Yeah, so I've seen a bit of everything. One nice thing is that even if you decided, so if you want 16 months, September or January works. If you want 12 months, it has to be January intake only. I've seen people join both intakes and do amazing things regardless of intake. What's nice also, if you join January thinking you're going to do 12 months, you can extend it to 16 months. So it's not a hard cap on that timeline.
Nice.
You do have to fulfill certain requirements during the program if you really want to finish within 12 months. But if you get here and you're really enjoying it and you realize that you want to take a deeper amount of time for that transformation, to get to know yourself, to take extra courses, that's possible. So I think that that is an additional element of flexibility that you don't find everywhere. And I think students do take advantage of that. If we're looking at the type of profile, the internships are possible in either one. In September, it's a traditional summer internship. If you join January, it can be a short summer internship or a longer internship at the end. Similarly, if your company is sponsoring you, you might have different, they might prefer that you come back to the workforce quickly. So I think we can find solutions for almost everyone. And I think it really requires a conversation to see what's most important to the candidates. Do they want to quickly return to the workforce? Do they want to do a huge career transformation? If so, perhaps 16 months will allow them to have a bit more time away. I would recommend 16 months always, because it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity that you get to leave work, go back to school, enjoy, have fun, live in France. So personally, I would say, the 16-month is a great option.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks for clarifying that. And is the tuition the same for if it's 12 versus 16? It's the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So the tuition is the same across. You get all the same advantages. January just has the electives in an accelerated format. So you just complete them more quickly. So instead of completing them over a semester, you do intensive electives.
Got it. And how much do those two cohorts interact? Because if I was a September intake, I'd want to meet the new January intakes.
100%. So they interact unofficially. So we call it the rentrée. So when everyone's coming on campus for the first days of intake, so existing students or current students come, of course, to welcome them, to give them tours, to invite them to clubs, etc. But there's one term wherein everyone mixes. So the specialization term is available to January and September. September has it in term 4 and January in term 3. So you mix your specialization with those from the other intake. That way you get to know everyone in the class from a course perspective. And additionally, our MBAs all live in the same dorm. So we really try to facilitate those networking actions. So across clubs, extracurricular, in the dorm, and then specifically in classes as well.
Yeah. And so maybe we could talk about that dorm. So again, the on-campus housing, most of the students live there. And how far is it to like classes and the center of Paris and nightlife and all the things Paris has to offer? Yeah.
So about 80% of students, I say, will live in the dorm. Some will live in it for the whole time and some of it the part-time. So the first 2 terms are really intense. So a lot of students want to live on campus because, as you asked, it's about a 5-minute walk. You could, if you like to sleep in, wake up 10, 15 minutes before and make it on time for those early classes. So it's very close. We have like a private wooded campus and everything is encompassed within this private wooded campus. So it's in the trees, not too far from our MBA course building. So right there. And then if we look at Paris, so I personally am in Julian-Josas, so that's where our program is. I commute daily from the very center of Paris. It takes just about under an hour. If you were to live in like the more southern arrondissements in Paris, you can do it in 40 minutes. And then in terms of nightlife, of course, we have different bars on campus. There's one specific bar where a lot of things happen on Thursday nights. And then we have a lot of students doing kind of extracurricular parties or nightlife around the campus. So a lot of picnics by our lake, barbecues by our lake. And then we're a private wooded campus, but if you walk 10 minutes down the hill, you're in this most like quintessential cute French village, and there's beautiful French restaurants, there's a nice bakery, there's bars. So there's a lot happening. And if someone wants, public transportation is extremely accessible. So that's what I take to get to work every day. But also you can take an Uber for a very reasonable price into the center of Paris. We also have shuttles that go into Paris, specifically on the weekends. So students who want to go out and live the party life in Paris can take the shuttle at the beginning of the evening. And we have 2 shuttles that come back at the end of the evening for our students.
Oh my goodness.
They have the best of all worlds.
Yeah,
they get the city life, but the country life. It's like,
That sounds very comfortable. And for some of our listeners who maybe this is the first time they've heard of HEC Paris, can you give our listeners a bit better understanding of like what the university's reputation is within France and Europe, and how, people perceive the business school?
Yeah, so we have a long-standing history of excellence and tradition. So we were started in 1881. So as a standalone business school, this is maybe a bit different and unusual and special. And I think it's what makes us special in all that we produce. It's been a history of educating business leaders so that they can do business abroad. So diversity is really at the heart and core of the business. And it's why the school was created back in 1881. We really believe in research. So we have several research centers. We have top research professors who incorporate the research into their teaching. So we believe that means that students are at the forefront of knowledge, really learning, we say learning by doing, but learning by listening, learning and all of that. And then if we talk about reputation, HEC Paris is the #1 business school in France across our programs. So we have master's programs, executive programs, consistently ranked among the best, if not #1 in the world. Within Europe and France specifically, an extremely good reputation. People are extremely impressed when I say that I work at HEC Paris, and it can open a lot of doors, and the alumni are extremely successful who have graduated from here, specifically in France. Some of the leaders of the biggest companies in the world have done their degree here, as well as a former president and many more.
Yeah. I mean, I saw some stat that I think over 3,000 of your alumni are either CEOs or CFOs or entrepreneurs, started their own companies.
Yep, and growing all the time. So hard to track, but I'm consistently impressed, especially with our executive MBA. We have a lot of already CEOs coming in, and our other programs, we see a lot of people going on to take C-suite positions. And then of course, we have a lot of the French unicorns. They were graduated from HEC Paris as well.
Wow. So, I mean, one question I'm trying to pivot the podcast more towards is to talk about return on investment, because we know that education is great. I mean, you're living in Paris, you're going to a top business school, but this ROI is always in the back of our listeners' minds. And so I would like to learn more, especially from like the international student perspective, because it seems like most of your class is international, right? Why do you think this is a great return on investment for them?
Yeah, it's something that's at the forefront of my mind because like with tuition fees increasing in business schools worldwide, we want it to be accessible. We want it to give back to students on like an emotional and a knowledge level. But of course, there has to be a very strong reason to choose a business school and make that investment. So we're thinking about that often. We'll talk about scholarships, I imagine, later. So that's definitely a way to kind of offset it. But I think that going to business school in Europe makes a lot more sense when I see, because I compare quite often the tuition, and our closest competitors are probably in Europe or the US. In the US, the tuition is much, much higher, and it's not necessarily all encompassing. So when you come to HEC Paris, the current tuition is 98,000 euros. That includes everything from your books to your healthcare, because of the way that France works, etc. Your meals or lunches that we provide at the canteen are subsidized, and our on-campus housing is also subsidized. So I think that a lot of students look quickly at a brand or a tuition fee And they think just about that one cost, but I really think it's important for incoming students to think about the total cost and the length of time. I know I've had many smart MBAs who do many calculations. So I don't think it's the only thing that should drive the decision, but I think it's part of it. Then, of course, careers is also important. I do think, though, that a lot of people are looking at return on investment, and that's like directly dollars for some. But I do think you have to look a lot bigger, because a lot of our students that come here want to get international work experience, live in France or in Europe or England for some time after the MBA. The value of that is something that's hard to calculate, but it can make you much more desirable in the future for companies. I think also students look at the salary right when they finish the program. So let's say 3 months after graduation, you're making X in France. There's a lot of things in there, like additional vacation time that you wouldn't have in the US, healthcare, pension, etc. So and also like the PPP value of purchasing wherever you're going to live and work. So I think that it's quite a big thing to try to calculate. And there's many things that maybe sometimes prospective students leave out. So I'm trying to put as much in there as possible is great in terms of the actual like money value. And then you have to think about the ROI on most of the other things in terms of your investment. For example, if you want to change careers, you might not be getting the same salaries. Yeah, so our students can come from oil and gas or mining backgrounds, for example, and they're looking to completely pivot or transform their career. That might mean initially a smaller salary, but it might be much more rewarding on emotional, giving back, or personal impact. And a lot of our students today are looking more for impact than dollars. So I think that's something that students or incoming students, prospective students, anyone looking at an MBA might need to make a new column, which measures what's important to them, their value system, their personal mission, which might, you might assign a value to that that's not a dollar value.
I love that. I mean, it's actually something I want to write about in the future. I mean, there's many different ROI calculations. All the rankings have done them, right? But ROI could be, like you said, on your impact, on your life experiences, and many other things.
Yeah, on your transformation too. Like I know recently the FT started looking at where people come in terms of industry before and what they do outgoing. And it's quite a new feature in there versus, the salary 3 years after graduation, PPP adjusted, et cetera. So I do think students need to look more deeply. And if you can come up with a way to write this or a ranking, I think it could be beneficial to many people. And maybe there's like 5 streams of ways to evaluate an MBA based on your goals.
Yeah, that's a whole 3-hour
Yes.
podcast.
Yes.
How would you describe the student culture in the program?
So I was really surprised when I joined at how collaborative and how willing they are to give back. And I do think maybe part of this, so our graduates are involved in our interviews. So if you are admitted to the program, you have to pass 2 interviews with 2 different graduates. I think they really help us assess fit and keep this culture. So what I see in general is when there are job opportunities, instead of people going off on their own and practicing and being cutthroat, it's extremely collaborative, that they're there to help each other, build each other up. And I do think the fact that I guess you would call us more of like a generalist MBA because our placement is pretty diverse. I do think that also helps maybe with competition for specific sectors. So people are coming in and they're looking to do different things afterwards. So they really are trying to facilitate that for others. So maybe you have a consultant looking to go into finance, somebody in finance looking to go into tech. And again, I find it to be extremely collaborative. I'm also impressed with what they do while they're here. So some of them will, lead a new project or start a new club or organize a trip. And I just find it to be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, aren't you a MBA graduate yourself of the program?
Yes. So I did the executive MBA. I loved it. I was just welcoming the newest intake and I started 5 years ago. So I was like thinking back to when I was in their shoes and I was trying to find like the biggest takeaway. And I think this applies to either executive MBA or MBA or maybe any MBA. And I feel like what I left and what HEC specifically gave me was the ability to be comfortable in really uncomfortable situations. So coming from different backgrounds, looking at a balance sheet or presenting to the C-suites or, doing something in like organizational or operations, I feel comfortable. But beyond that, the situations that you experience, the diversity of culture, of professional background, of group work, it really sets you up to be comfortable in anything.
Interesting. I love that. Comfortable and uncomfortable situations. Yeah. And why do you think now is a good time to get an MBA in Paris and France, of all places?
Yeah, so I do think that your personal story and what employers are looking for changes over time. I think that companies now are extremely diversified. They're operating in many different countries, and they're looking for people who have experience and exposure to many different facets. I also think that they're looking for people who are agile, resilient, and can be ready for everything. I do think that our curriculum changes enough and prepares people enough to be ready for kind of the unexpected. So if you've taken an MBA at HEC Paris 1 year ago or 10 years ago, I think that you're equipped to handle the types of situations that are ever changing in the market, even if you don't have the exact skills and need to like retrain, reskill. So I think that's one reason. I think that Paris and France are really the center of so many things, but specifically if we look at sustainability, anything ESG related, France is at the forefront. And I know that this will cascade across the world in the next, months and years. I also think that it's amazing to live here in terms of work-life balance. If you think, okay, yes, you have to work really hard, but you do have technically like more vacation than you would have elsewhere. And I think that's becoming more and more important to candidates, kind of having, a different life work that suits them in all aspects. And then I think outside of that, I've been living here for 10 years and I still leave my building and look around and I'm absolutely stunned by the beauty and I'm wowed by the food. And it's just absolutely incredible. And then, with all the business opportunities, the businesses that are headquartered here, I think it's a really like happening place, but also with like this modern way of thinking that you wouldn't necessarily think that you would get out of, this European lifestyle.
Interesting. I mean, can I just
Yeah.
ask, what do you mean about modern way of thinking? Like, what do you mean by
Yeah.
that?
So I do really think that France is at the forefront of everything. Like, this is just also a personal opinion, but if we think about like, again, we'll just take it to like CO2 emissions, sustainability, the
I
ways that
see.
companies operate,
I see.
fast fashion, things like that. It really is at the cutting edge. So I think that we have this like traditional city with this amazing culture with, beautiful old buildings. But then I think that they're really leading the world, definitely, ahead of many other countries in terms of thinking about the future, how to be sustainable, how to have only electric cars in the city. Like, that's just a very small thing, but there's so many much, much bigger things like renewables, all of those things. I think really France is should be and can be extremely proud of what it's doing there.
Yeah. And one last question about the curriculum that I just remembered is, could you talk a bit more about those 5 different specializations
Mhm.
and also maybe share some information with our listeners about like, does HEC Paris have a strong reputation in, say, finance or entrepreneurship?
Yep. So we have 5. The nice thing is that you don't have to choose until you've spent about 8 to 10 months in the program. So you can speak with current students, you'll get to meet the professors, they'll do kind of a pitch on the 5 specializations. So we have marketing, entrepreneurship, finance, advanced management, and sustainability. All of these basically in the next 4 months, all of you'll have many different courses, cases, hands-on different kind of things, and they'll all be dedicated around this topic. We have specializations in all of them, which clearly help, and we have some really good videos which highlight all of them. What I'll do is I'll just give you highlights on our entrepreneurship specialization maybe first. So what's interesting about that one is that students come in and they don't necessarily want to start a company. They might also want to be entrepreneurial in any company that they join. These specializations can often be a way to speak with future employers and explain how you have skills or what hands-on things that you did to achieve different new skills. For entrepreneurship in particular, we're located in the biggest hub of innovation and development after the Silicon Valley in the US. So we have all kinds of research, development, innovation facilities here, and we have scientists who come in and pitch new technology in the specialization. And then students form groups or companies to work and pitch a real technology. So if we take an example, I had one of my favorite projects, I think it was about 6 years ago now, it's become a real big business. They took a technology that was able to measure the weight of trucks that's movable on public roads. So their biggest applications were in Canada, I think, and also maybe China, because they had a lot of trucks that were damaging the roads and they couldn't catch them, et cetera. So they actually formed this company within the specialization, and 2 of the members joined the company, and it's now, a huge company, and they're still developing it to this day. So all of the specializations have a hands-on component. For example, in the marketing specialization, we had companies, they come in, and once it was BCG, once it was Rakuten, and they say, make us a digital transformation strategy for our company, and they were able to pitch to senior executives. So always those courses, hands-on components, really interactive, and really great for getting skills on that topic.
Wow. So is that entrepreneurship example you shared from the Creative Destruction Lab, or is that different?
That's different. So you can kind of enhance or like double down in different ways. So the entrepreneurship specialization is a dedicated term. There's so many. Sometimes we have almost too many choices because students are like, okay, I can pick this and that. You can also complement or enhance it by joining the Creative Destruction Lab. This is a really cool partnership that we have with the Rotman School of Management. I was extremely excited, honored, thrilled, because recently I went to they have different streams, and one of their streams is space. So I'll just explain it quickly because it's a bit complicated. Yeah, but basically our students are able to act as consultants for companies launching in different streams. So for example, the space stream, you have companies doing really, really cool things related to space, and our students can join as consultants to help them. If we take this even further, I got to go and see companies pitch. So we saw space security, so how to manage, security from space. We saw someone who can better predict tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes from space. So really cool cutting edge technologies. And you have a panel of mentors. One of them included Chris Hadfield, who's a Canadian astronaut, who's like a hero of mine. So just being part of HEC and our students and myself, we got to be in a room, have his feedback on the different pitches, have his feedback working directly with our students as consultants. And this is just one of the mentors. They're, between 30 and 50, and they're extremely impressive and skilled in their stream. So we also have it for machine learning, AI, and climate, the 3 streams, and our students can take part in that. Yeah.
How do those mentorship relationships work?
Yeah, so in CDL and specifically, the mentors are assigned by stream. So the type of stream that it is, and the schools work together to choose and pick mentorships. And then depending on your company, it's almost like the mentors bid or believe in them. And then they say, okay, this one's for me. And then they kind of help them succeed, and they're eliminated as they go on. So it's super interesting. We have other mentorship opportunities at HEC. Like we have something called TEC, which is the executive committee, which is something that students can apply to join. I think it's 25% of our graduates have been a part of TEC. And this is a monthly special class where you're paired with a mentor, and you have CEOs who come in and explain really things that would be management related that are really confidential. So how do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? And it's a really special mentoring session that complements the MBA for those who would like to do it. And then of course we have alumni mentors, et cetera. But it's getting complicated because there's so many different options. And I think it's best to probably sit down based on your goals, and we're trying to map out all the different journeys. So soon that should be on our website so people can see all that, choose your own adventure basically.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's move to admissions side of things. Yeah, I mean, what are the qualities you're looking for from your full-time MBA applicants? What's top of mind for you and your team?
Yeah, so I think that we're really into making genuine connections and trying to interact and meet with our applicants. So we have recruiters in the MBA who travel, but they also, of course, do virtual calls, et cetera. And I think it's great to speak with them because it will help you best understand why HEC is for you, best understand what makes sense about our curriculum, what choices you want to make, et cetera. So that's a good initial call. That will also help if you make it to interviews, because our alumni do not like it if our prospective students don't know about HEC. So I think that's a great way to start. So us getting to know you and, you having genuine and compelling reasons for choosing us will kind of be like a thread through the process. When we look at applicants from an admission standpoint, we look at many, many different things. So we look at education, so prior degrees, where you studied. We look at if you have international experience. So have you worked, traveled, lived abroad? If not, do you have international clients? And that's really because it's such an international environment that we need to assess open-mindedness. We look at the CV. Of course, we look to see if you've demonstrated career progression, if there's been transformation. We look at the leadership activities or volunteer. So those you're able to advocate for. Maybe an unusual one that I don't know if everyone assesses is we do look at languages. We look at this more in relation though to career goals. So if someone is like 100%, I want to live and work in France in consulting, we will look and assess if they have any French or if they plan to learn French. We look at the essays to assess, communication skills, different situations, and then we also look at references. So we look at two, hopefully professional references. So I'm sure every MBA program says the same, but it's best to have professional references. And then lastly, of course, we look at like tests. So GMAT, GRE, executive assessment, or English test. So that's like how we look on the top. But then also the recruiter will be able to hopefully tell a story just in case you've left anything out, or, there's more that we want to know, or more there.
Yeah. I mean, on that language point, I think it makes sense, especially given your accelerated nature, right? That if people are looking to work in France, they should probably have some French language skills. Like, what level are you kind of expecting from applicants who are, say, want to stay in France or Italy or elsewhere? Yeah.
So we do offer language courses while they're here, some in person. So in-person French courses are available as part of the MBA. So you can take them, you can have them. You can also do up to 14 different languages in our language center. So we're not looking for you to be like professionally fluent. We're just looking maybe for you to either have started, even A1, A2 level can be a good indicator. And then you can elaborate and say, listen, I have already started French lessons. I'm going to continue them while I'm at HEC, or I'm really hoping to work in Germany. Therefore, while I'm at HEC, I'm going to, learn German. So we look at it as, if you're fluent, it's even better, but it's also maybe about the thought that goes into it, because we often have prospective students perhaps that will say they're really looking to pivot and work in luxury. They might not mention any French, and that might be an industry, or similarly consulting in France, where it's important. It can be though, like if it was Italy, that was their dream, of course, we'd be happy if they had some skills. Any level is great, the more the merrier, unless you're more open career-wise. So we're just kind of looking for like a coherent story, or maybe like a motivation, a depth to the motivation.
Makes total sense. And having lived in France now yourself for many years and done so many professional things there, how important is the language for just maybe not even for your career, but just integrating in French society and getting things done? And what is the sort of expectation there?
So it really depends. I think you can get away, especially now, without it, but you might miss so many subtleties and beautiful things about Paris, about the culture, if you don't have it. So I do know graduates who live in Paris who can just say like, hello, goodbye, order a croissant, and it's fine. But I think that probably they would miss things like if you go out with French friends, you might miss jokes, you might miss descriptions, there's things that you could miss. I think in work, it's also super important because it shows that France is extremely proud of their culture, of their language, and like I think for good reason. And I think if you come and you don't want to learn it, it doesn't send a great message. But this is again just a personal thought. So I think it shows that you're open-minded, that you care, that you're willing to try. And if you show those things, then I don't think that the level is the most important thing. I think it's more that you care to integrate, that you want to meet someone even halfway. And then it can go much, much further if you're fluent. You'll just have an easier time traveling. speaking to people, even, going in a shop, it's really nice to be able to go into your bakery and talk to the person who's serving you. And that's just another part of life. Like, I think it just enhances everything. So, but you don't need it in certain companies. For example, if you work at Amazon, it's not a requirement. You could work at Amazon in just outside Paris in Clichy, and you could have a great life. So, yeah.
And these are made clear to your students with the career services department, because I imagine it might be difficult to know which companies really prioritize the language and which ones don't.
So we try to have conversations even before they come in to let them know that, listen, you can definitely get a job in France without French if you want to. However, you'll be limiting yourself. If you want to work in consulting in France, it's much more difficult without French. So we try to kind of set the tone already in our recruitment conversations to manage expectations. And then once they come on campus, I think some will join irrespective and just see what happens. And I think then the Career Center will have many different conversations. But what's nice is that you have a lot of countries around where it might not be as critical. So I know, for example, we have quite a few students who have gone to work in Luxembourg, the Netherlands, the UK, where language hasn't been as important, or even Germany, they've had some options as well. Spain and Italy, it's a little more complicated, but again, it really depends on your strengths, your expertise. If you're also an expert, let's say you're an expert in your function, and let's say we can take maybe a student coming from China who's already worked in luxury, who wants to work in France. If the company is in particular doing business or looking to grow or has a segment in the Chinese market, then it might not be as necessary because they'll want you for what you're doing. If you're looking to completely transform, it also becomes more critical. So these are conversations they have, and I think right from the get-go in careers. And I think students should come in a bit open-minded, because I think otherwise you might miss opportunities. But we have all types who come in with a plan, they stick to it. One who come in with a very serious plan, they do something else. Some that just aren't really sure and find the most amazing job. So I think I've seen every type of path and many, many things that you couldn't have anticipated. And I think that's the beauty of the MBA.
Yeah. To kind of dive into some of those elements you discussed, dive one level deeper. So if we could start with, I guess, GPA and GMAT expectations. I mean, I know you guys have listed, and it's great, like we strongly encourage applicants to score in this percentile. So everyone, I'll link to that in the show notes so you can look. But I'm wondering, from you, like what are your expectations there with GPA?
So I think this is something that always surprises people. We rarely look at GPA. So of course we ask the transcripts to ensure that someone has completed their degree, to take a look, but we don't look at it in our selection process unless, for example, let's say someone provides a GMAT and their quant is slightly under what we expect. So let's say someone comes in and we're like, that quant's a little low, but we love their profile. Then we might look at their transcripts just to say, have they ever had any quantitative classes and did they do okay? If they did, it could mitigate a so-so GMAT. So we really try to kind of pick and choose. And if we really feel a profile and love a profile, we will dig deeper. But if you have like a so-so GPA and your application is good, we will never probably even look at it. It's more if you have other things wherein we're like, okay, will they succeed in class? Their GMAT, like this could be a pretty good example where someone had a low quant, but it was an engineer working in finance. So we said, guys, probably this person, like what happened with their GMAT, what's going on here? And then we took a look at the transcripts and we saw that they had really high marks in all kinds of quantitative skills. So there we're able to like mitigate the bad GMAT for the great profile based on the fact that we know that they're going to succeed in the classes because they've done, much deeper quant classes in the past.
Right. So the key question you're looking for is, will they succeed in class? That's
exactly. Yeah, that's the only real, of course, having a high GMAT is great for employers. It's great later on for recruitment. Some, recruiters are really looking for that. But in admissions, our main thing that we're looking for is like, A, can you understand and follow the classes? So that's why the English test. B, the GMAT helps us to assess verbal. But then also quantitatively, we don't want people to struggle. If we do see, again, someone who looks great, but maybe they have slightly lower quant than we recommend, we do also sometimes give like extra insights, tips, tell them what to study before coming in. So again, it's all about their success. It's not so much for my admissions team.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. That's crystal clear. Yeah. And then in terms of your essays, so I think you guys, I really enjoyed your essay questions. Maybe these are from last year, but I think you guys have like five different essay questions. Okay. And I mean, in general, not to focus in on any one of them, but what are you trying to get, right, from all these questions? Because 5 questions is a lot these days, actually.
Yeah, it's been debated. A lot of people ask me, like, why do I have to write 5? Some only ask 1, 2, 3 now. We've kept our essay questions pretty consistent over the years, so we haven't changed them in quite a long time. And I've debated and had many conversations, but I'm really happy to stick with 5. First, I think we want people who want HEC Paris. If we're just like your 5th application and you're copying and pasting your essays everywhere, I'm not sure that's exactly who we're looking to attract. I think we really want students who want HEC Paris, and like a lot of our applicants will only choose us. And I love that. And I think like our alumni community loves that as well. So I think sticking to 5 is important, not just for us to kind of demonstrate if you're motivated, but also I think if you're going to follow an MBA, spend a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of dreams, all of that, it's good to do some self-reflection. And I hope that our essay questions push people to reflect on themselves, their goals, etc. So if some of them, like motivation, I think is normal, career goals are normal, etc. The why HEC, I think, is pretty important. And then some of them push you to, be a little bit dreamier. Like, what would I do in another life? What would I show you in my city? And this is where we're trying to get to know you through the paper. So it's a moment for you to tell us a little bit more. Of course, we're also evaluating, how it's written, etc. But we're just looking for like those nuggets of information that we can pull out. And we do discuss this and we do read them and we're like, oh, wow, this is so interesting. Or can you believe this? Or, there's one about an ethical dilemma. And it's just so interesting to see what people choose, how they articulate it, the choice that they make. Once they made the choice, what did they think after? So yeah, I think it's important, but I'm probably a little old fashioned and maybe someday we'll have to change, but I don't think it'll be in the near future.
When I was an admissions director, we also had 7. We had 7 questions because my boss was from INSEAD. INSEAD had a lot of questions. So it was so we did it for many of the same reasons. But I really liked your questions because I hadn't seen some of these before. So like let me just share one of them. This one was really fun. Certain books, movies, or plays have had international success that you believe to be undeserved. Choose an example and analyze it. I mean, it just, what you're really doing, it seems to me, is like just trying to get to the core of like, like trying to get a more colorful piece of data about someone, about the candidate. So I really enjoyed your questions.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad. I've heard the same from candidates who take a look and I think they see a lot and say like, oh, so many questions, I can't copy paste. But then I've heard many times that it helped them to spend time, think about it, prepare their application, self-reflect, go away, think about it, all of that. So I don't know, maybe it makes you want it more. Maybe it makes you, I don't know, put some skin in the game. But I think that, and they're fun to read as well, like you said, and a bit of variety in there and the one that you can choose different options.
Yeah. And okay, so I have to ask you about your 2 interviews because they seem to play a very important role in your process. So from my understanding from your website, there's a 10-minute oral presentation in both, followed by an interview. So could you like share with us kind of what the alumni are looking for and how they communicate with you guys and what you guys are looking for, right, from those interviews?
Yeah. So if you make it to the interview rounds, you're asked to prepare a presentation. So it's a 10-minute presentation on anything that you like. So some people will do it on something at work, a challenge that they solved. Some people will do it on an extracurricular project, a volunteer project, etc. So number 1, you'll present that same presentation to both alumni. What the alumni are looking for in general
I
will be
see.
communication skills, of course. They want to make sure that if you're in a group, if you're in class, that you can understand and also absorb the information and also work in a group. So I think that's probably the number one thing we're measuring, because that's probably one of the biggest challenges. If you have someone in your group who can't understand you, or you can't work with them, it would be difficult. They're not supposed to evaluate the topic, but I think sometimes they're taking all these little things into account when they make their decision. And it's, again, what I want you in my class, what I want you in my group. They look at time management. So did the person read the instructions? Are they, respectful? Are they valuing my time? How do they
So
explain?
don't be
You
late.
know, yeah, don't be late. I'm trying to think, like, I think it's just like any interview, being professional. So we have had students come in, like, we used to do them in person, and I know one student once wore like beachwear, flip-flops, etc. And that's not something that is evaluated,
Yeah.
but it is something that might have an impact on if the alum recommends you. So at the end of this discussion, they're going to watch the presentation, they're going to ask motivational questions, they're going to assess if they think that if HEC can deliver your goals, if your career aspirations are manageable, et cetera. So they're going to assess all this, and then they're going to give scores for all of that, but they're also going to give a final recommendation with a note. And they can recommend, really, we really think this person belongs, this person does not belong, or this person, I do not want them in the program. If anyone says, I do not want them in the program, even if it's only one of the two, we can't admit them. So even if I discovered a gem
Wow.
and I'm like, this guy is amazing, he has the best CV ever, he's a
Yeah.
VP at Goldman Sachs, he's sponsored, et cetera. If an alum says, I do not want them in the program, we trust their opinion and we do not admit them. So it's a bit risky, but
Wow.
I think that's how
Yeah.
we keep it fit. Yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes it's frustrating, but
I
overall,
can
I
imagine.
believe in our community.
I can imagine as an admissions person, but no, thank you so much for sharing that. That's crystal clear, and that's like exactly the type of answer our listeners will love. So thank you. I mean, I think it just helps too to hear that, because you know they know what to expect too, right? I mean, it's very clear, and then they can really just focus on their story and the real reasons for wanting to do the program, instead of second guessing, like, oh, well, what are they looking for and all that. So
We hope it's a give and take too. Like, the student or prospective student has to prepare a lot, answer a lot of questions, but they also have an opportunity to ask questions and, to take advantage of this alum who's successful, but also willing to give back to the community by doing interviews, because these are all volunteers that are volunteering
wow.
to, make
Yeah.
sure that we have the best people that are coming to the program.
Yeah. And they're mostly done over Zoom these days, right? Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
So
Yeah.
until COVID, they were in person, and now they're all online. The online aspect is actually great, because when it was in person, we could only do like in the region. So we couldn't allow the interviewers to be as diverse, because we try to do a bit of matchmaking in the interviewers. So if you have a goal of going into consulting, maybe we'll
Ah,
choose a
yes, yes.
consultant,
Yeah.
where possible. So this allows us to do a bit, I think, better matchmaking.
That's great. That's great. Well, crystal clear. So, I guess my last question I had on the admissions front is with your scholarships, and how you kind of view scholarships in the admissions process, what your goals are with them, and of course, how applicants can improve their chances of
Yeah.
possibly winning some grant money.
So they seem to be, just as tuition increases, I think, like, more and more important, especially to candidates from certain regions. So I am proud that we have, I think, great scholarships. So we have excellent scholarships, diversity scholarships, and also scholarships from Forte for Women. And also we have scholarships from Laidlaw Foundation. So I'll go into a bit of each of them. But basically, everyone admitted to the program is automatically considered for excellence or diversity scholarships. Excellence is just the overall excellence of your application. So all of those elements that we discussed early, if you score strongly amongst all of them, you can, get the excellence award, which can be paired with, or we could give diversity instead. So diversity can be any type of diversity, anything. It could be professional, it can be nationality, but gender, it can be anything though. And that can be an SA6. So you can actually say, this is how I'm diverse, and we can decide to award a scholarship there. We also have Forte, because we're interested in having 50% women in our program. So we're always, looking to achieve at least 50%. More could be great too. And then we recently introduced 10 per year, 100% of the tuition scholarships with the Laidlaw Foundation. This is
Wow.
like a
Okay.
real, I think, game changer for ensuring that a woman who would not normally have been able to do an MBA can. So in September, we admitted 5, and in January, we'll admit another 5. They're coming from countries all over the world, and really they have to show financial needs, so would not have been able to do an MBA otherwise. Of course, they have a great career path, et cetera, but for some reason, there's a financial blocker. So this has been great. Maybe like a fun fact, last year, I think 60% of our students got a scholarship. So it is accessible, it is possible, it is more likely than not, which is, I think, great. And the highest scholarship is 50% of the tuition for the MBA. I would say the average scholarship last year, I think, was 15,000 euros. And of course, there's like different thresholds based on if they're excellent and diverse and a woman and.
Right. No, thank you so much for sharing that. So the excellence and diversity scholarships might get someone to 50%, right? Is that
Yep.
that's the max.
Mhm.
But then you have these new 10, 100% scholarships that are very rare. But that's great that you have them.
Yep.
I think that's clear. Maybe any misconceptions people have about scholarships that you would just like to clarify?
Yes, I think that a lot of people come in, and I mean, it depends on the people, et cetera, without a real plan on how they'll fund their MBA. So they concentrate on getting into MBAs and they think, okay, I'll just get scholarships, and they don't really investigate the total amount of scholarships and or how they might fund their MBA elsewise. And I think this can add to a lot of frustration, disappointment, and sometimes I think even financial irresponsibility, because if you I think it is, though, financially responsible. I think it's good to think about the total cost of the MBA, because if you apply and think you're going to get scholarships, and even if you get a great scholarship, it's incredibly important to also think about the living expenses. And if you are going to think about the living expenses, I suggest in Excel and really trying to stick to it, because I have seen students get themselves into like kind of a bad situation where all of a sudden they're not really sure if they didn't secure, that internship right away and the salary of the internship wasn't enough. So I do want students to come in to feel good, to not overestimate the ROI after versus what's coming in. So I think it's good to think about the whole picture. And again, the total cost, not just the tuition fees, but like what's your rent going to be every month? What's the average cost of food? If you're going to go out a lot, or if you plan to like travel Europe, like I think it's just important to do the exercise of thinking how much will you spend, because we have students who spend between 20 and 26,000 euros over the 16 months. We have some that spend a lot more, and we have some that are able to do a lot less. But I think it's really good to think about that, like financial management. And if it's not France, you might need to think about health insurance. You might need to think about books. You might need to think about public transportation. So here, I think we have like the price tag is for everything, but I don't think that that's typical in the MBA world.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. Let's move to careers, our final section.
Yeah.
This is my favorite section. What should international students' expectations be for boosting their career with a MBA from your university?
So this is a tricky question, because I think everyone probably needs to manage their expectations a little, because if you do nothing and come to class, you probably won't have the boost that you're dreaming of. It is like a two-sided investment. So I think that you have to know that like it's going to be hard work regardless of what school you choose. Even a school with the top brand, you'll need to do networking, join clubs, think about how to tell your story, think about why and how a transformation is important, etc. I do think if you come to an MBA, especially ours, you will leave with a better knowledge of like what functions, industries are out there. You'll leave with the capabilities and the competency to work on any side of the business or in any function. And I do think you'll have a lot of doors open, networking, you'll have companies coming on campus, et cetera. But depending on your goals, you might need to make some compromises. So I think you can expect to have a lot of opportunities. You can expect that if you work hard, you'll have choices, but those choices will sometimes come with, different things that you will get exactly what you want. You might have to move countries to get what you want. You might have to compromise on your salary. So I think you can expect to have, great options and the great tools to go where you want to go. But I do think sometimes students arrive in an MBA and think that companies will like knock on their door and come to find them. And that happens sometimes, but it's like not the norm. It's the exception, you know. So I think that just knowing that the more you put in, the more you'll get out of it, not just at graduation, but for all your jobs following would be maybe something to think about. At HEC Paris in particular, I think you might have more choice geographically and in terms of different industries, functions. I think you'll have more like overall choice than in other business schools. And I do think that our salary package is extremely competitive, especially for Europe. I just don't like to get too caught up in that because I think if you just look at that, you might not make the choice that's best for all your future decisions.
Yeah, I mean, can you explain briefly how the visa process works?
Yeah, sure. So when you attend HEC Paris, one cool thing is that you can spend on the student visa once you graduate up to 1 year doing job search. So hopefully you get a job right away, but sometimes if you have something really niche, it might take longer. So I know that there are sometimes students who target a specific type of country and a company and a specific type of role wherein, you know, it takes longer because it's like 1 in a million type of role. So you have one up to 1 year to job search. Once you get an offer, you go in and your APS visa converts to a work visa. So everyone who studies at HEC Paris can live and work in France without any kind of lottery or like quite easily. Also, any countries within the Schengen region, it's quite similar. So Spain, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Germany would be consistently where we place students. We also place a lot of students in the UK, but that process is more complicated and it requires sponsorship from the company. So if someone is like, I only want to work in London, I only want to work in London, maybe they want to do like a double degree or an exchange with HEC instead of choosing to study here. I do think that the location you choose your MBA, probably you should think about like, where do you want to work after? Is the brand going to help you? You know, will I have a visa? Like just all of these things are good to take into account.
Absolutely. I mean, and on that note, like the relationships that HEC Paris has with employers and the business community, like how can your students really leverage that?
Yep. So we have more than 80,000 alumni. Biggest concentrations are in France and the UK, but we have them everywhere in the world. So in, I think, 132 countries. So we can, you know, leverage that. Companies come, of course, on campus. We have companies that come on campus for different degrees. And of course, our students have access also to the employers coming for master in management, master in finance, and then we have MBA specific companies. I also think that the HEC name and brand is really easy to leverage, especially in Europe. So often if an employer sees that on your CV, it will open a door in itself because it has such a strong reputation. In France and in Europe, it's almost like a Harvard on your CV. So really all of a sudden you have that. And then pretty much almost every company that you can think of, you'll find some alum working there. So they're pretty receptive. It's a really warm community. And then we also have like a house for our alumni. So in the center of Paris, where we do all kinds of networking events.
Oh,
So
cool.
we have
Yeah.
100 professional and networking clubs. So we have like the Wine and Cheese Club, which is my favorite with the alumni, but we also have the HR club, the marketing club, the automotive club. So for example, last week, our HR club did like AI and HR and had a professor come in and they did a lecture and they talked all about what's new in AI and HR. And our students have access to any of these club events with alumni. So there's a lot of different ways that you can like leverage the community, the companies. But again, sometimes the onus will be on you to make that next step or to figure out what's happening and to go to it.
Yeah.
Because it's not
Yeah.
always going to be like, oh, you want HR? Okay, go to this. So you have to kind of be, I think, following what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, and this goes back to the first question I asked you about setting expectations. And what I'm hearing from you is there's lots of options and tools, as you said, but your students have to stay hungry,
Yeah.
you know? And so I guess my next follow-up question to that is like, what templates, if there are any, have you seen from students that, you know, that are hungry, that come in, that kind of land the job that they want or something close or maybe something unexpected, but it led to, you know, a good outcome there? Like, I mean, would you say
Yeah.
they're just increasing their kind of surface area and getting out there a lot and meeting a lot of different people, or are they more focused? I'd just love to hear kind of anecdotally, any stories you might have?
I think you see two types. Sometimes you see the really focused one who's so sharp. They come in, they're like laser focused. They attend the workshops, but they also do things on the side. So they're already thinking of how can I network? How can I leverage my past? How can I leverage my community? This is kind of a standard one that's easy. The other one would be someone who comes in with a focus but remains a bit open-minded and I think a bit more genuine maybe. Because as much of the job search, it's not just about being focused and doing all these checklists. It's about being like humble, open to feedback, taking the development from the MBA, seeing how you apply it, listening to others and making genuine connections. So I do think that if you have a genuine interest, if you're always thinking about you can give, but what will you get? Like, you need those both sides. You can't just be like focused. And the thing is, there's also, I think, a bit of luck. And I think a lot of it also comes down to how you interact with people. You can send a LinkedIn message and it can turn someone off. You can send a LinkedIn message, it can make someone want to help you. And like, that's really subtle stuff that I don't know if it's a template, but I would say look into the subtle things that you're doing. Like when I worked in careers, I had someone who I was coaching and she was like, I'm not getting any jobs. And we did a mock interview. And she was so frustrated at that point because she'd had interviews, but she hadn't gotten the job that she was like projecting almost like a negativity. She wasn't smiling. She didn't realize. And so we were talking about other things and she explained how she like learned how to bake baguettes while she was living in France. And I was like, oh, when you did that, you changed, you smiled, you're warm, you sat up in your chair. Like these things made me compelled. They made me want to get to know you. And so I think like, of course, there's coaching, there's coaches, there's like many different things that you can take advantage of in the Career Center. And I think that sometimes people skip the soft skill part because they think that they're good there and they just need the connections where it has to be, I think, more holistic journey. And maybe that holistic is more like the template or like the kind of thing. And don't leave it till the last minute. You have no idea how many students come like 2 months before and they ask for a list of contacts, and that's never going to work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you got to plant those seeds early.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
genuinely just get to
And
know people,
genuinely,
reach
of
out,
course. Yeah.
not like, okay, here's my 3 contacts. Hi, can I have a job? Hi, can I have a job? Hi, can I have a job? I'm desperate now,
Totally.
but so
Yeah, that
yeah.
energy is never really helps you, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I know a lot of your students are moving into consulting and finance and tech. Would you say that's pretty much the top three placements for your students?
Yeah, consistently in the employer report, that's been the top three. I think within those, you have all different things though, because if we take tech, for example, Amazon can be considered tech, but then within Amazon, we have people who go into finance or product management or even fashion. So I think that, yes, those are the big bulk. And of course, within consulting, it can be like strategy consulting firms, but sometimes it can be internal consulting too. But I think those remain the main things that MBAs want and that fit their goals and needs. We do have 5% in, I think, like luxury and retail, which is pretty consistent. We do have more students who say they want to work in something like with impact or sustainability, but we haven't seen yet MBAs always making that choice because sometimes there's trade-offs there in terms of salary, et cetera. So yeah, I think it's still pretty consistent. More probably interest in tech than 5 or 10 years ago, because I think students are looking for work-life balance and tech sometimes provides that a little bit more than like a strategy consulting firm. Maybe slightly less in like investment banking or finance and more different types of finance roles.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's clear. And this has been great. Thank you so much. I just want to say I really appreciate you just like being so open with in answering my questions. So, and I think our listeners will really appreciate it. Last question for you is there anything you just wish more applicants knew about HEC Paris?
Yeah, I wish, maybe those applicants who haven't already heard about us or don't know. I mean, I wish that in general they would just get to know us more deeply and consider us and just realize that it's like really flexible and customizable, but that it's special in a way that's almost really hard to describe. So maybe that's just more like a teaser, get in touch because
Yeah.
Usually people feel, and this is something that I'm proud of, like a vibe from my team, which is like genuine, caring, open, willing to share, and like really passionate. And it's something that our whole community has and is that you can't really describe. So I wish I could better share that here, but I would say the best way to share it is to meet either a graduate, a current student, or a staff member. And I think you'll feel like the vibes right away.
Yeah.
And you'll know if
No.
you fit because it's a very
Right.
specific one, I think. So yeah.
No, that's great. And I think it's very rare that a top ranked school is willing to do that as well and willing to meet so many applicants before they apply, right? Of course, after is different. So take advantage of that. We'll link to that contact page you have. And Sara, thank you so much. Really appreciate you having you on and getting this podcast episode out there finally. So
Amazing.
thank you
I'm
so
happy
much.
to be here and hope to come back in not too long.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Remember, you can get free school selection help and a profile review at touchmba.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Just search for Touch MBA.